This is my first installment of Quilting with Dawn. And after talking to Carolyn, the quilter extraordinaire, I decided I'd tackle on another quilt of my own. So I came across a pattern at the quilting shop a little while ago, and it's called lap kitties. So those that know Carolyn and I know we love our kitty cats. So what we're going to do, what I'm going to do, and hopefully you don't get too bored by watching me, is watch as I figure out how to quilt this lap kitties here. It's extreme close up. It is a pattern that is made of a rail fenced quilt with applique black cats, or whatever color you like, onto the quilt. And then the quilt can also be bordered, and of course it will eventually get bound and quilted. So I'm going to do it all step by step, no doubt with Carolyn's assistance every step of the way and or guidance. But this is my project to take on. So let's unbox this lap kitties and see what it is we're going to be doing. First of all, fabric requirements. Very straightforward. It calls for 12 fat quarters or 24 fat eighths. Now, Carolyn can tell you exactly what those are. I think they're basic sizes of fabric, and I'm going to use 12. I've already picked up my 12 colors, which I'll show you in a bit. Not only that, you need a fabric for the cats, the kitty appliques, and so I do have some black fabric for that. And then you need the basics. You need something for the borders, haven't picked up my colors yet, and you need the binding. So, and that's more or less it. If I understand the process correctly, you make the rail fence quilt first, then you applique the kitties, then you add the borders and bind it, then you quilt it. I think I got the order backwards. You you do the top, so you're going to do the rail fence and the kitties, and you sew down the appliques, then you quilt it. Nope, still got it wrong. Carolyn's laughing. You got to do the quilt with the fat quarters and the kitties, then you put the borders on, then you quilt it, then you bind it. Hopefully I got that right. Right, so the instructions themselves come along with the kitty appliques. So for example, there you go. You got one applique here, and you got the instructions all on one side of the page, and that's it. So that's how simple it's theoretically going to be. There are 7 cats. So you see there's one page, and there's another one with more kitties, and you get the idea. I have a total of 7 different kitties that are going to be appliqued, and one, someone has a sense of humor, one little mouse. That's what's going to go and be appliqued onto the quilt. What I'm going to do then is go through step by step with this video and do it in segments. So it'll probably be 5 or 6 segments. So before we move on to anything more, I'll show you the colors I picked. Right, so being organized, Carolyn offered me this little bin here that has my colors. So you get an idea there. I do like blues and reds, and I threw in some yellow for contrast. So I'm going to use these 12 fat quarters to make my rail fence. And as I mentioned, the cats are going to be probably black. I like black cats. So there we go. Now, this isn't the first quilt I've ever done. I've done 2 quilts before. The first one is this larger one in the background. It's also a rail fence, oddly enough. Coincidence, I tell you. You can see I like blues. And I made this quilt. It was a bit of a sneaky story here because Carolyn was teaching others on how to quilt, and she wanted to try a technique on me. And unbeknowingly, I agreed to that, of course, but unbeknowingly ended up turning into making a quilt, because I'd sew a section and she says, oh, that's pretty good, try this. And I try that, and try this. And so before you know it, I went, hey, I'm making a quilt. And then I carried on. And I sewed the top. And then Carolyn, because this was my first one, Carolyn actually quilted it for me on her sewing machine. The cool thing about this background quilt is that it went with me to Afghanistan for 8 months. While I was in quarters there, I had this quilt on my bed. So it was a little piece of home, a little piece of love from Carolyn who helped me make this quilt that I had with me in Afghanistan. Now the second quilt I did is this one, this smaller one here. It's called a twisty quilt. There was this thing you buy, it's a cutting pattern that allows you to first sew the top before the borders. You sew the top and you cut out pieces and then you twist them and assemble them. So it's why it's called a twisty quilt. You end up making these little crosses, and the way you assemble it, it turns into this nice little wreath. I think it's called a twisty wreath, in fact. So you see the theme here. I like blues and purples and whites, so a bit of green. Those are the colors I like. And this one I quilted myself on the machine. I stitched in the ditch around the various wreath parts, and then I added some other geometrics. So it was very easy to quilt by hand on the machine because everything was straight lines. And then finally, of course, then I bound it with this blue binding. That was the first time I've ever done a binding. I hand sewed it. So certainly all those techniques I used for the rail fence, for the quilting, the binding, I'm going to use when I make this new Lap Kitties quilt. So stick with me, and every little while I'll put out another video, and you'll see how this is going along. While I'm filming, while I'm going, I'll make a little game of it in the sense I'll count how many times I have to unsew something, because apparently that happens at the best, but I expect it to happen often with me. We're also going to count how many times I go, "Wah!" because again, I have this bad habit of when things go wrong, I get a little excited. So we'll count the unsews and the little panics, and we'll go from there. Stick with me. Cheers.